Coming up on Market Shares, actors are heading back to the big screen. The SAG-AFTRA strike is officially over. We'll break down the agreement.
Plus, things heat up on Capitol Hill as war rages on in the Middle East. See what House Republicans are proposing.
The market's bouncing back today after a mixed week. We'll break it all down for you. Hold on to your wallets because Market Shares starts right now.
Good afternoon and welcome into Market Shares. I'm Peter Elliott.
And I'm Bradley Hoppenstein. We start with an update on the Hollywood actors strike. It's been a long time coming, but some of your favorite shows could be coming back soon. After 118 days, the Screen Actors Guild has approved a tentative deal with the AMPTP, the trade association representing Hollywood studios. That deal would end their strike. Now, terms of the agreement will not be revealed until the union's board has reviewed the deal. Actors walked off set back in July in a joint strike with writers. Now, the writers' strike was resolved back in September, but production remained at a standstill as actors continued their protest.
Studios said they delivered the union, quote, their last, best, and final offer. While significant progress was made, there are still several items the two sides have yet to reach an agreement on, including the use of AI. Despite the agreement, though, there will still be impacts for some major companies such as Sony and AMC. Now, let's talk about some news out of Washington. Israel aid is still in limbo, with some Republicans asking for IRS budget cuts. Our Benjamin Schiller has been tracking this story for us. Ben, where does this request stand right now?
Well, Peter, it appears Washington is caught in the middle of another partisan debate. This time it's on the status of aid to Israel. House Republicans passed a bill that would cut billions of dollars from the IRS. In return, they approved aid to Israel, but the status of this bill is stuck in the Senate right now. This past Tuesday, Senate Democrats blocked Republicans their bid to send more aid to Israel. Something that we should know is that this bill does not include any aid to Ukraine. Democrats say they will not approve the bill until it includes aid to Ukraine, border security funding, and money to push back against China. And Democrats are willing to put up a fight for it. They have spent the week accusing Republicans of playing politics with the ongoing crisis in the Middle East. Now, let's go back to the bill that is in question right now. The current bill would provide $14.3 billion to Israel, including money being allocated to Israel's defense systems. The bill would deduct that same $14.3 billion from IRS funding. This is a situation that is not being taken lightly inside of the Biden administration. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen spoke to CNN last week on the bill before it was stalled. I think our viewers should hear that sound. Let's take a listen.
Absolutely. I think it's an irresponsible bill, tying support for Israel, lacking support for Ukraine, which are both vital national security interests.
And Republicans are going on the counter-offensive this week, too. Speaker Johnson said the current bill will be a good use of taxpayers' dollars, and it would help offset spending rather than borrowing money to give to allies. The IRS has always been a target of Republicans to cut money from it to allocate it elsewhere. It's unclear which side will budge first, as a close U.S. ally is asking for the money now, guys.
Ben, a lot of questions when it comes to the two countries at war in the world right now. The question many have, though, is when an Israel aid bill could be passed. What's the status of that timeline?
Well, that's a question that is on the mind of many within the DC quarters. First of all, I should note that this upcoming Friday, the 17th, this next Friday, I should say, is when the government is supposed to lose money for funding. The government could shut down as early as 7 days from now. So right now, any bill in terms of Israel and Ukraine is being stalled, and this could go on for a couple more weeks. But right now, I think Congress is focusing on getting that funding package figured out before the holiday season.
Well, Ben, like you just mentioned, Ukraine, Democrats fighting for aid to that country in its war against Russia. What's the likelihood of both sides coming to terms here? What side could budge first?
You know, like we've been talking about the last couple of weeks, Speaker Johnson, this is going to be a very hard month for him, but at the same time, he was a no-name congressman before he became Speaker of the House. So right now, he is trying to play to the tune of his Republican colleagues. His Republican colleagues do not want Ukraine funding in any sort of package. I think right now, it's going to be a busy couple of weeks for Congress because I don't think Ukraine funding will be included in any sort of Israel bill in the upcoming weeks, guys.
All right, Ben, thank you so much for staying on top of that story for us. We really appreciate it. Well, American credit card balances are displaying the largest year-over-year spike since 1999, a $154 billion increase. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York releasing a report stating that Americans owe just over $1 trillion. While this indicates strong consumer spending and GDP growth, a large percentage of credit card payments are more than 100 days late due to the high pricing economy.
God, it's just crazy. This is especially prevalent among millennials who are feeling the pressures of high student loan debt. Now, there's a direct correlation to the Federal Reserve's 4 rate hikes this year and credit card rates hitting an all-time high, up to 20%. Spokesperson for the American Bankers Association, Mike Townsend, advises those in credit card debt to reach out to their card issuer so they're aware of the situation. They also might be able to provide some relief or assistance. I mean, Peter, this is just one of many examples of inflation and wages and the Federal Reserve with those rate hikes. It's all just catching up to people. And we see when we talk about numbers and consumer spending, people are spending more again. Yes. But it looks like they're just racking up debt. That's the thing. You don't know when you talk about inflation, it's hard to see the actual impact on pocketbooks for regular Americans. You see it right here with credit card spending. Well, we work, we rose, we fell, and now we bankrupt. That's the latest declaration from the beleaguered real estate company, which filed for Chapter 11 on Monday. It's rock bottom for the company that set out to change the way, say it with me, we work by renting out co-working spaces in major cities across the world. The company was once worth $47 billion as recently as 2019, but it was brought back down to earth after a failed IPO due to criticism of its founder, Adam Neumann, and questions about its profitability. WeWork's value has slipped below $1 on the stock exchange, and it's even struggled to stay listed. The company hinted that bankruptcy could be coming back in a filing in August. That was amid an already barren landscape for commercial office space, as we've seen since the pandemic. And landlords fear that WeWork's bankruptcy could leave even more empty space. The company has already renegotiated most of its leases, but we see office space just being leased less and less. A lot of it turning into residential apartments now too. Right. Bradley, it's hard to imagine a worse time in history to be a leaser of commercial office space. So yeah, that seems to be a future for housing, but there's a lot of challenges there as well. It's not that easy to turn commercial office space into housing. So we'll see what happens with that market. Well, Uber is one company that is still growing. The rideshare company reporting earnings this week, but missing analysts' expectations. Still, the company bringing in $9.3 billion in the third quarter, up 11% from last year. But Wall Street was expecting numbers more in the range of $9.5 billion. The company's net income was up about $220 million, compared with a net loss of over $1 billion in the same quarter last year. Uber is happy with its report, even if it missed expectations. Its CEO says gross bookings, trips, and monthly active users all rose in quarter 3. The company releasing its earnings on Tuesday with the stock closing up more than 3%. Not too much movement as the week went on, though, settling in at a little under $50 a share. And a nice pump for Planet Fitness this week. Shares surging double digits earlier in the week as the company topped Wall Street's earnings expectations. Now, it's raising its revenue outlook for the year. And for the quarter, it posted a profit of $39 million. That's up from $27 million a year ago. Revenue jumping 14% to almost $280 million. The company now expects to post 14% revenue growth for the year, up from its previous guidance of 12%. Now, look at that stock, though. That line close to a straight shot up, and obviously both the company and investors happy with the news, and you can see the stock flattening out a bit to end the week. It sits around 60 a share right now. Peter. Well, Bradley, from a pump to a poke in drug maker Eli Lilly, a big week for that company. The FDA approving its new weight loss drug, Zepbound, hoping to get it on the market by the end of the year. In clinical trials, the drug helped users lose up to 52 pounds in 16 months. The drug is intended for adults with obesity, and its release comes at a time when weight loss drugs have exploded in popularity. Eli Lilly also says it's increasing the supply of its diabetes drug, Mounjaro, which has been taken off-label to treat obesity. The two drugs share the same active ingredient. Weight loss medications are expensive, over $1,000 for a month's supply. Medicare currently doesn't cover weight loss drugs, but Congress is looking into expanding access for the treatments. Peter, we were talking about millennials earlier. A lot of them use dating apps such as Bumble. Well, chief executive of Slack Lidiane Jones is taking over Bumble in January. This comes after Bumble's Whitney Wolfe Herd announced she will be stepping down and moving to an executive chair position. Now, a succession plan had been in the works for a number of years. Jones was a strong candidate for her tech industry experience and the desire to implement AI into the dating world. Wolfe Herd's original idea behind Bumble was that it would focus on females initiating the conversation so that they were in control of romantic pursuits. Even after stepping down, she will remain Bumble's largest individual shareholder.
Disney earnings are topping expectations thanks in part to profit from ESPN Plus as well as continued growth at theme parks. This is also the first quarter that Disney is using its new financial reporting structure, which segments the company into 3 divisions: entertainment, sports, and experiences. The company reported that the experiences division saw revenues jump 13% as parks also saw higher attendance and ticket prices. On the other side, Disney came up short in terms of ad revenue. The company says the decline was primarily from ESPN or Disney's ABC network, which saw lower political advertising revenue during the quarter.
Let's stay in the entertainment sector. The Las Vegas Sphere that took social media by storm just a few months ago, it's facing multiple losses. MSG Group, who owns the entertainment venue, reported an operating loss of almost $100 million, and the Sphere CFO is resigning. Sphere reported these losses following the end of their fiscal quarter on September 30th. Since then, the company earned $4.1 million in event revenue and over $2 million in advertising and suite licensing. But despite those losses, CEO James Dolan told shareholders that the company is, quote, building a positive momentum and is positioned to drive long-term value.
Nobody knows how to build positive long-term momentum like Knicks owner James Dolan, Bradley.
Absolutely. Well, coming up after the break, closing bell rang about 12 minutes ago. We'll have the week's biggest movers for you.
Come on, it's not that hard.
My big man fingers are having a problem with these little tiny buttons.
Whoa, watch it there. Your blood pressure's gonna go through the roof.
Tell me about it. I'm trying to learn how to get it down. Instead, it keeps going up.
High blood pressure can increase the risk for heart attack or stroke. Learn how to keep yours at a healthy range.
Ever hear a voice command? Just say text barbershop to 97779.
That's not what I said.
Just give me that. Now my blood pressure's up.
Hi, my name is Sadie Miller.
My name is Luke Brady. I go by St. Luke.
So this one I started with this guitar lick.
Welcome back to Market Shares. The market's closing about 14 minutes ago. Peter, let's take a look at how the S&P, Dow, and NASDAQ ended the week.
Well, it's a winning week on Wall Street here, in the green for all 3 indexes. A great week for tech stocks especially. That's what propelled the S&P 500 to an 8-day winning streak. Bradley, one of the longest for that index in 2 decades.
S&P having its best week of the year. Let's take a look at the Dow, up 102 points to end the week, sitting at about 34,194. And the Dow also up. It was kind of a rough session on the week, but it's up on Fed news. They haven't raised rates again. It looks like inflation is kind of steadying out, maybe getting closer to that 2% target. And then you want to round us out with the NASDAQ, Peter?
Yeah, certainly. Another great week for the NASDAQ as well. And obviously, stocks doing well this week, but the bond market also up on the week. That was also what helped propelled the market this week. So a winning week on Wall Street, and always a winning time when we bring in our market analyst, Annie Claff, here on Market Shares. Annie, I know you've talked about, it's been a lot of losing weeks on Wall Street recently, but a nice week this week. I know you had a couple stocks you had your eye on. What won the week for you?
Company TransDigm, the top performer for the S&P 500 this week, up 12% just in the last 5 days. And then this is a culmination of their deal to acquire the electronic device business of private equity-owned Communications and Power Industries. That's a deal worth $1.385 billion. And this is also after they released their 2023 fiscal adjusted earnings, up 51% from last year.
I think anyway, it's remarkable when you think of the aerospace field, you think of Raytheon, Northrop Grumman. You don't often think of TransDigm, but it has had such a remarkable performance over the last decade, over the last year. Just a year ago, this time November 10th, it was at $625. Now almost $1,000. It's pretty remarkable how well this stock has performed.
And just this week on Thursday, the stock jumping 10%. It was the best performer on the S&P on Thursday. Peter, are we going to get to Micron here?
We're going to take things a little more locally here to Central New York with Micron, which has had a pretty good week. It's been a challenging couple last year or so for the semiconductor industry, but we know Micron obviously coming to Central New York, promising to build a huge mega fab complex, and its stock up this week because earnings are good, but then also China has announced that it's warming up to Micron and U.S. industry with semiconductor manufacturing coming back to China.
Yeah, China obviously a very important player in the semiconductor game. Micron coming here to Central New York. But another point on Micron just announced today, President Biden actually meeting with Chinese President Xi next week in San Francisco. They're expected to talk a lot about trade. You imagine they'll talk about the semiconductor and chip business as well, Annie.
Especially because Zach's semiconductor memory industry, which Micron is a part of, has gained up 5.9% in the last week as market shares completely. So this is going to be, Micron has been culminating around the market and investors for long-term success, not just short-term too.
All right, let's round things out here with Disney. We talked about it a little earlier, but big week for Disney. It looks like Bob Iger, since he's come back, those cost-cutting measures are actually working. The company announcing earnings earlier this week, like we said. Revenue for the third quarter up 5% and 7% respectively. And like I said, Bob Iger, his cost-cutting seems to be working. And Disney Plus finally looking towards profitability. They lost only $387 million this past quarter, and you think that's a big number, but they lost almost $1 billion in the same quarter a year ago. So you've never seen a company really celebrate almost $400 million loss, but Disney is. And like we said earlier, Disney Experiences saw a 13% increase in revenue, a little over $8 billion there, and they're announcing they're going to invest another $60 billion in its experiences. So it's parks, resorts, cruises, other pieces of that sector, and that's really been the focus. The only place Disney was down this quarter was its Orlando parks, which is a little interesting.
Yeah, certainly. Always good when you get closer to profitability. We know how tough it can be for some of these streaming companies to actually make money. So for Disney, it's good that you're losing a little bit less money. But you talked about Bob Iger. It seems like Wall Street is just so happy to have him back in the driver's seat. They didn't love that other Bob Chapek. So it's much nicer to get the Ithaca College grad back at the helm of the mouse. So certainly good for investors that Bob Iger's back.
And also huge Disney plans too coming forward with the plans to purchase the entirety of Hulu. They own 2/3 of the stake right now, and Comcast owns the remaining 33%. So that is big moves coming too.
A lot of analysts think they're just going to lump Hulu into Disney Plus. I imagine that's what will happen, but we'll have to see.
And certainly relative to other entertainment industries, it's always great for Disney that you actually have that physical infrastructure, those parks, as opposed to Warner Brothers Discovery, which we see is so beleaguered and struggling. But Disney, it's pretty great that you've got Disneyland and Disney World. Well, thank you so much for joining us here, Annie. We'll see you later on in the show, but still ahead on market shares. Don't call it a comeback. Bally Sports lands a deal after a year of failure. Stay with us.
I see you mobbing over her. Let's go. Let's mob. Let's crawl. Let's crawl. Let's crawl. Hey, yo, we mobbing. Come on, girl. Let's crawl. Hey, yo, let's crawl. Hey, yo, let's crawl. Hey, let's crawl. Hey, yo, let's crawl.
Welcome back to Market Shares. Maybe auto shares, because if you're looking to buy an electric vehicle, now is the time. Car companies and dealers are slashing thousands off of purchase prices to attract wary buyers. With more on this is our analyst, Annie Claff. Annie?
Thanks, Peter. Automakers are making big moves to combat a surplus of inventory of electric vehicles, and those big moves are in the form of discounts and rebates. Hyundai and Ford are offering cash rebates of up to $7,500. And take a look at this breakdown on discounts from electric vehicles versus regular. In September, EV discounts reached 9.8%. Now, these price changes aren't just discounts, but companies like Tesla and Ford have been reducing the starting price to models over the last year. The average price of EVs from more than $65,000 last year has gone down to nearly $51,000 last month. Market leader Tesla has had to reduce the price of some models by nearly a third. This all comes after sales growth slowed for battery-powered cars and consumers are willing to pay less for that car type. Regularly needing charging location has also been a block for some buyers. Here's how badly Tesla's stock has suffered. The electric automaker has fallen 18% in the last month. Another huge root to this phenomenon is Biden's EV tax credit program launched in April. This was an attempt to make U.S. less dependent on crucial technology from China, and in turn, fewer models could receive tax credit. Lastly, dealers also believe this has to do with only reaching a consumer base that is struggling with high interest rates. Now that early adopters have already purchased their electric vehicles, and this inventory pileup is bad for carmakers given hefty investments on battery plants and factories, but also for dealers. The longer a car sits in the lot, the more it takes away from dealership profit. Discounts are actually pretty common by car makers, but in the long run, it can hurt profits, and consumers should they want to try and resell later down the road. It's expected that discounting will continue for some time in the form of leases primarily, because that is a loophole to get around the domestic manufacturing and utilize the tax credit. On top of discounting, manufacturers are cutting back on production plans. Peter, Bradley?
All right, Annie, thank you so much for that insight into an industry that will really see grow and grow as we move on. Well, there are also some concerns that potentially were alleviated this week on sports television. Diamond Sports Group, which owns Bally Sports, some of the biggest news regarding teams and leagues it broadcasts this season. Market Shares analyst Chile Casadelli joins us now. Chile, it looks like there will finally be some stability with that company. Chile?
For now, yes, Peter, good afternoon. We all watched it during the MLB season. The San Diego Padres, the Arizona Diamondbacks, gone from Bally Sports, with Major League Baseball handling broadcast for the rest of the way. Fast forward to the beginning of the NBA season, where the broadcast Bally has will remain this season as part of an agreement made between the league and Diamond Sports Group. 15 teams are involved in this. You see there on your screen the Atlanta Hawks, Miami Heat, Milwaukee Bucks, San Antonio Spurs with rookie phenom Victor Wembanyama, many others as well. One team that isn't on the list, though, the Phoenix Suns, who moved to over-the-air broadcast this season after issues with Bally Sports Arizona. Now, there's something from this agreement that has implications for us here in New York. Many of us have watched Syracuse football and basketball games, as well as the Yankees and the Nets on the YES Network. Diamond has agreed to sell its minority stake in YES, along with Marquee Sports Network, which broadcasts the Chicago Cubs. Diamond has a 20% stake in YES, while it owns a little bit more of Marquee, half of it to be exact. The group says in part that the developments represent significant progress. This saw as Sinclair is floated buying back Diamond Sports Networks, this time for pennies instead of the nearly $11 billion it paid back in 2019. That's according to New York Post. It sounds very Dave Portnoy buying Barstool Sports back from Penn National Gaming, doesn't it, Peter?
It sure does. Always fun when you can bring in Barstool Sports and Dave Portnoy. So we've talked about primarily Diamond's involvement with the NBA, but we know that Bally Sports also broadcasts other sports as well, like the NHL. Anything else we should know about those other leagues?
It's important to note that, Diamond is actually considering doing this with the NHL as well, having this kind of one-year deal and then allowing everybody to figure their own thing out past 2023, 2024. The NHL, there has been a lot of upheaval in the RSN game. Remember, the NHL is basically the fourth fiddle in our American sports, but there really is no penalty for going over the air in hockey. We've seen teams start to do it already with scripts like the Golden Knights, the Arizona Coyotes after the collapse of Bally Sports Arizona. Again, a lot of regional sports network upheaval. You have Pittsburgh Penguins going to Fenway Sports Group, their owner, which actually started its own sports network, and it's not the only example.
And Chile, I want to ask you, what's going to happen after the season? Where could some of these teams go? I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind is ESPN Plus picking up every NHL out-of-market game. Like, do you think we could see something like that happen where they go to a bigger media company?
It's very interesting because there's a lot of different leagues playing different styles as to how they're doing this. Obviously, we see the biggest examples of that national structure deal with the NFL, and most recently, the MLS, where you get Apple TV Plus and you can get all the games and there's no blackouts. But with the NBA and with the NHL, they're going to be the ones that are most subject to this. But again, baseball is another one where they're thinking about restructuring some of these contracts to potentially have a big national contract or maybe some smaller national contracts that all get put into one. It's a big story that continues, and it's going to change the way a lot of us watch games.
All right, Chile, thank you so much for your continued coverage. Quite literally a story that we will be watching to see what happens. We'll still ahead on Market Shares. 2 fast food staples are taking their collab nationwide. You might be loving this. Stick around.
Welcome back to Market Shares. We're going to end things on a bit of a fun note here. Peter, are you hungry?
I'm always hungry, Bradley.
Maybe a Big Mac, maybe a Krispy Kreme donut. What are you feeling right now?
Oh my God, my mouth is watering right now. Please, after the show, let's hit it.
All right, well, I hope you're hungry because McDonald's and Krispy Kreme are in talks to expand their partnership to more locations. The two food chains have been testing Big Mac eaters' appetites for donuts in Kentucky for over a year at a handful of locations, and it looks like more could be coming soon. How do you mix McDonald's and donuts? Where does that come
I'm surprised by that word expand because I didn't know this was a partnership. So
I had no idea.
I didn't know this was an existing collaboration here, so I guess we're already expanding something that exists. Well, the donut chain stock has risen more than 20% this year. Amazingly, discussions on the expansion include what scale is needed to expand beyond Kentucky, as well as the commercial viability of the partnership between McDonald's and Krispy Kreme.
Peter, I got to ask you, do you think that 20% is solely from this? I mean,
I don't know. Donut companies increase in the stock market going up 20%. I'm amazed. What could possibly, do they beat earnings? I don't know how could that go up so much?
And I feel like it was just a few weeks ago we actually talked about Krispy Kreme scaling back. But I mean, how could you say no to a deal with McDonald's?
I don't think you can.
Here's what I'm thinking. I went to the South Florida Fair about a year ago, and there's a food truck sitting there with a burger in between 2 glazed donuts. Do you think we could see some kind of Big Mac Krispy Kreme crossover?
Absolutely, but now that you say that, this does strike me as very State Fair-esque, the kind of collaboration between fried food and then, obviously burgers. Like that does strike me as something you'd see at the State Fairgrounds in Syracuse. Well, speaking of the availability here in Syracuse, there are no Krispy Kremes here in Syracuse. The closest we have, actually, I think it's New York City, which is unfortunate.
Really?
I think one place where if Krispy Kreme wants to expand even beyond that 20%, they should just expand their reach, their store beyond just a couple locations. It's big in New York City. It's not really big here in upstate New York.
A little savory, a little sweet, and that was a sweet show for you all on this Friday, but that's all the time we have for you on this episode of Market Shares. You can follow us on social media, Twitter and Instagram at CitrusTV News. You can follow Peter at Elliott Sports.
That's right.
I'm Bradley Hoppenstein.
And I'm Peter Elliott. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great night, Syracuse. Join us next Friday when the markets close on Wall Street.